People see me and have different perceptions. Some of this is due to prejudiced views and stereotypes, or some of it's due to the mask that I choose to wear and display. Even with all the perceptions, I get trapped in the box of what it means to be a man, and most importantly, what it means to be a black man. Unfortunately, none of this includes what it means to be a person that experiences an array of emotions and feelings. Anger, happiness, hypersexuality is what you're used to, but I'm so much more than what you see. I experience various feelings and emotions, and my mental health is important too. Now I'm here to strip down these stereotypes and masks to show you that I am a person too. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. We are live. The National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known, roughly 2.3 million Americans have bipolar disorder or manic depressive uh, illnesses. And mostly uh, Black Americans are suffering because they go untreated and sometimes undiagnosed. But we know that proper treatment can control mood swings and improve life. We're going to talk about that this morning as we have psychotherapists and change agents, Sonny, Etienne, and Rwenshaun Miller joining us to discuss that. We also have some headlines for you this morning as the U.S. observes the 70th anniversary of the landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision. It turns out that racial segregation in schools across the country has increased dramatically over the past 3 decades. And New York could become the fourth state to ban legacy admissions in the college application process, a practice that has been long criticized as favoring white or wealthy students based on their familial alumni connections. And former President Jimmy Carter's grandson said that the oldest living president in history is at the end of his life, now about a year and a half in hospice care. We will have some details on Jimmy Carter this morning. And with all the documentaries and all of the celebrations of musicians gone by, artists who have left perhaps too soon, Warner Brothers and Discovery, along with CNN, announced that in partnership with Oprah Winfrey, they've acquired the documentary Luther, Never Too Much. Yeah, there's going to be a documentary on Luther Vandross, one of the most unsung ever, perhaps uh, with the most distinguished voice ever. Luther Vandross. We'll give you a little bit of details on when to expect the new documentary featuring Luther. It's called Luther Never Too Much. We'll give you some information on that this morning. But first, racial segregation in schools across the country have dramatically increased. It's the 70th, 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 7 decades anniversary of the landmark Brown versus Board of Education ruling. This Friday, actually, tomorrow marks the 70th anniversary. But schools have grown more and more separate, more and more unequal, even though the country is more racially and ethnically diverse than it ever has been. Um, but decades after that decision in 1964, or I should say the 1964, 60, goodness grief, I can't talk this morning. But decades after the Brown decision and the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the U.S. have moved toward policies that increase the isolation of Black and Latino students by race and poverty. The resegregation of America's public schools coincides with the rise of charter schools and school choice options. And as civil rights groups have turned away from desegregation battles, segregated schools disproportionately hurt Black and Latino students since those schools tend to have fewer resources, more teacher shortages, higher student to school counselor ratios, and fewer AP class options. Schools on average have become less white and more Latino, Asian American, and multiracial. But students of color are going to schools with fewer white students and fewer resources. A UCLA civil rights project report found. It says though 45% of all U.S. students were white, the typical black student attended a school that was 76% non-white in 2021. The average Latino student went to a school that was 75% non-white. And when you analyze the data from the US public schools going back to 1967, a Stanford and University of Southern California study found that segregation between white and black students has increased by 64% since 1988 in the 100 largest districts. And here's one stunning stat. The number of intensely segregated schools, defined as schools that are 90 to 100% non white students, nearly tripled from 1988 to 2021. And in 1988, about 7.4% of the nation's schools were intensely segregated. By 2021, that number had ballooned to around 20%. Several states saw about a 20 percentage point or more increase in intensely segregated schools from 88 to 2021. California, their intensely segregated schools increased sharply, spiking from 11% to 44%. Maryland, New Mexico, Nevada, and Texas had some of the largest percentage points increases in intensely segregated schools. Power 96 says in the South, you have more private schools using federal tax dollars, so the schools can be segregated. Of course, guess who goes to private schools? We know. Also, legacy admissions. Now, we talked a lot about affirmative action. So the Supreme Court said no more affirmative action. Well, um, hello, pot. Here's the kettle, because New York has now moved to become the fourth state to get rid of so-called legacy admissions in the college application process, a practice that has long been criticized as favoring white and wealthy students based on their family attachments. Legacy admissions is simply affirmative action for privileged kids, said State Senator Andrew Gornatis. He says legacy admissions have become rightfully under heightened scrutiny following the Supreme Court's 2023 decision to limit race-based affirmative action programs for colleges and universities. Um, you look at Columbia University, Harvard, Cornell, and others who embrace legacy admissions. If two applicants have similar credentials, the preference or slight advantage is given to the legacy candidate. So, isn't that affirmative action? Several New York legislators hope that the Fair College Admissions Act will address ongoing issues of racial inequality that have persisted for decades due to historical discrimination in education. Um, one such state lawmaker went on to say that he says it struck us as inherently wrong that and unfair that the Supreme Court would strike down affirmative action policies and programs, but allow something like legacy admissions to stay put, which is affirmative action just for another group of people. Isn't that, it's like we know. Um, they they dress it up and call it something different. What is that old saying about putting the lipstick on a pig, which is kind of crazy. um, Southbound 3000 says round two of young white federal judges getting put into position to control and change laws that will affect blacks for the next 50 years if Agent Orange is reelected. Everybody's got a nickname for that guy, Agent Orange. But legacy applications continue to pile up at schools. My dad gave 2 million, my uncle gave 10 million. My cousin's my cousin's wife, who is also my sister, he gave 17 million. I mean, come on, let's just cut it out. Cut it out. It is. It's certainly affirmative action, but for as they say, wealthy and non folks of color. That's all it is. In the state of New York, more than 40% of institutions use some form of legacy admissions preference. 40%, more than 40%. Wow. Southbound 3000 says is asking, aren't our HBCUs getting students in on legacy day? You know, um, that's a whole, I don't think that's apples to apples, but I also don't think that it's necessarily the case southbound. But that's a whole nother show, a whole nother story. We can certainly dig into that. Remember, look, HBCUs were founded simply because they were not allowing black students or brown students or any non-white students to go to school, to go to college, to go to universities. So I don't know. We can look into that, but I just don't know that that's a fair comparison. HBCUs are so disadvantaged, so underfunded. Um, under the previous administration, they were, as much as he boasts about what he's done, which was absolutely nothing for HBCUs, they were looking to shut HBCUs down under the previous administration. Um, so, you know, we can expect more of that if that's the case in November, if things go one way in November. But they certainly were the purpose. Just like the purpose of affirmative action, people forget the purpose of affirmative action. The reasons for it still remain, strongly remain, and it did not put anybody on a uneven playing field. The idea was to try to level it somewhat, and affirmative action did. I lost you. Oh my gosh. I'm back here panicking like I lost you guys. Oh my. A malfunction. I guess at least Power 96 it wasn't a wardrobe malfunction. And I still don't have you. Oh my. This is incredible. All right. This is absolutely incredible. We hear you. You hear me. Okay. You hear me. Okay. This according to my microphone, you can't hear me, but you can hear me. Okay. Um, legacy and family member, isn't it the same? Yes, pretty much. Yes, yes, actually. Legacy is only good for our fraternities and sororities. What happened to just, again, being there on your merits? But again, I was saying affirmative action was to try and level the playing field. It never did. Oh, thanks, Dr. Nicole. I was losing my mind. Mike V says if race was used to justify discriminating against black people, then race has to be used to repair the disenfranchisement of black people as well. That was my understanding of affirmative action. Somebody else gave Trump the nickname Spanky. Um, Austin says, thankfully, it was not a Taylor Swift malfunction. Listen, I would suggest and surmise, Austin, that there are just as many, if not more, who would rather me have the malfunction than Taylor. And I would also suggest you might not see anything different in the results of a Taylor Swift malfunction and a Stacey Brown malfunction. All right, all the Swifties coming for me. I know Flavor Flav does not like that, so he may be a little upset right now. Oh boy. Okay. Former President Jimmy Carter, his grandson Jason, gave an update on the 99-year-old 39th president's health. And on May 14th, at an annual mental health forum in honor of Rosalind Carter at the Carter Center in Atlanta, Jason said the former president is, quote, coming to an end, but he's still here. He's still there. Jason, who's also the chair of the board of trustees for the Carter Center, said, "My grandfather is doing okay. He's been in hospice, as you know, for almost a year and a half now." Um, he also discussed Carter's faith during this time. He says he really is, I think, coming to the end that, as I've said before, there's a part of this faith journey that is so important to him. And there is a part of that faith journey that you only can live at the very end. And I think he has been there in that space. Carter's been in hospice at his home in Plains, Georgia, since February of last year. Of course, his wife, the former First Lady Rosalind Carter, entered hospice care a few days before her death on November 19th, 2023. She also was diagnosed with dementia earlier that year. And of course, on November 28th of last year, Jimmy Carter attended her funeral, and many were certainly struck as they saw Carter leave hospice care to honor the life of his late wife. When he arrived at the ceremony, he was photographed in a wheelchair with a blanket covering his legs, and on it was a stitched image of the couple with the words, "The Carters." His last public appearance took place about a week before his 99th birthday. He and Rosalind both attended the Plains Peanut Festival. We know that Jimmy Carter is a was a peanut farmer. Very proud. He's very proud of that. Has always talked about that. Even as president, he spoke very fervently about being a peanut farmer. And the Carter Center recently reposted a video of the former First Lady and President riding in the back of a SUV through the annual festival set in his hometown. He is the first president to live to 95 or older and the only one to see the 40th anniversary of his inauguration, which is really amazing. Um, Mike V notes that President Carter wanted Biden to speak, to do his eulogy. But after this whole Gaza crisis, he says, "I wonder how Carter thinks about this now." I'm not sure. Good question. I'm not even sure if Carter has been in a position to pay attention to what's going on in Gaza. Power 96 says Carter was the most decent president from the 1970s to now. Obama is in another category, he said. Yeah, Carter, when we talked about this before, he certainly is and became, after he left his president, not during his presidency, but after his presidency, has become one of the most popular presidents in U.S. history. He dare say he's top five, some top three as far as popularity. Um, After his presidency, for sure. Perhaps he's the most popular post presidency than any other president. But certainly, he is a very, very much beloved figure now, and has been since he left office um, back in 1981. Oh, Austin says Andy Young has also been asked to eulogize Carter. That's interesting. David Youngblood says Carter was the first to condition U.S. support on human rights. For some odd reason, I always remember the whole Camp David peace talks and resolution with the prime minister then of Israel, Menachem Begin, and Egypt's president Anwar Sadat. And I remember very well Sadat's assassination, public assassination. Um, it was very, very Kennedy-esque, his assassination. He was riding in a motorcade and was gunned down as he rode in a motorcade. And I think it was obviously open air motorcade, like John F. Kennedy. Yep, he is responsible for the Camp David Accords. And it's never too much for Luther Vandross, and it's never too late to celebrate Luther Vandross. CNN announced that Warner Brothers Discovery upfront presentation, CNN Films, in partnership with OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network, has acquired the documentary featuring Luther, Never Too Much. From award winning filmmaker Dawn Porter, the film follows the iconic artist as he charts his own course, becoming one of the most decorated and influential artists of all time. It's produced by Rain Dog Films and Jamie Foxx. Foxhole Productions for Sony Music Entertainment and Sony Music Publishing in association with Trilogy Films. Everybody wants credit for this. So the plan is for it to premiere in 2025 on CNN, OWN, and Max. Um, Luther, Never Too Much, chronicles the story of a vocal virtuoso. They use a wealth of rarely seen archives and have Luther actually tell his own story with assistance from his closest friends and musical collaborators that include, of course, his long time friend Dionne Warwick, Mariah Carey, Valerie Simpson, and Miss Roberta Flack. The film relives the many stunning moments of Luther's career. I always go back to the fact that they didn't win a Grammy until he died, which is really a shame. The film does explore his health struggles, but it also explores the lifelong battle to earn the respect that his music deserved. He is how does someone so talented, so who really set the tone for so many others, really was an amazing voice. How does he go so unsung? I keep saying unsung because that's really that show unsung, but that I mean he is the epitome of unsung. And so now, as they say, he's getting his flowers, which is fantastic, fantastic. Looking forward to seeing this. I'm not a big documentary person. Some of them, some of them are really interesting. Um, and I'm pretty sure that this is going to be right up there with it. I saw the a documentary about Cary Grant not long ago, and I just started watching it. I'm like, okay, this is nothing else really on. I really wanted to watch something, and it's called Archie, and because Archie happens to be Cary Grant's real name, it was really captivating. Really captivating. It was more of a docudrama because it wasn't all documentary. I mean, there was. I mean, it was really good. But I'm looking forward more so to Luther, Never Too Much. It did have its debut or premiere at the 2024 Sundance Film Festival in January, where it received an amazing standing ovation and just top of the line, glowing reviews. Power 96 is asking, will that be Big Luther or Little Luther? I think you'll get both in the documentary, big and little. Um, he also says you have to remember when Luther was at his peak, light skin was in. Luther was considered dark by the music industry. Absolutely. Absolutely. But he's getting his flowers with this documentary. And so we're looking forward to um, Never Too Much, a documentary on the life of the one and only Luther Vandross. Okay, so an estimated 2.3 million Americans have bipolar disorder, also called manic depressive illness. A person with bipolar disorder can go from feeling very high to feeling very, very low. With proper treatment, people can control these mood swings and lead fulfilling lives. While the rate of bipolar disorder is the same among Black Americans as it is among other Americans, Black Americans are less likely to receive a diagnosis and therefore treatment for the illness. Most Black Americans with bipolar disorder are going undiagnosed and untreated. Rwenshaun Miller is the Good Stress Company uh, and founder of Eustress Incorp. And he is also a psychotherapist, author, speaker, and mental health change agent. And Sonny Etienne is a psychotherapist and change agent who is dedicated to helping people discover meaning, understanding, and effective resolutions. We now welcome to Let It Be Known these aforementioned experts, therapists, change agents, actually. Morning, guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you all.
Rwenshaun, am I saying your name right?
Yeah, Rwenshaun.
Rwenshaun, okay. He's got that, that world-class spelling. That's why I'm saying he he's one of those brothers who, he go around the world and they're like, "He's a distinguished gentleman." That name. And of course, Sonny, we all know Sonny. Sonny's just got it going on. So we appreciate y'all jumping on this morning, guys. And either one of you could just, y'all, as they say, y'all can drop some knowledge on us. But let me just throw this out there. Let's simplify this as best as we can and explain exactly what is bipolar disorder.
Rashawn.
Well, bipolar disorder is a mood disorder that where you have a difference between moods, where you can have your high highs, which are categorized as manic phase, and then you have the opposite end of that which is the depression phase, where you have really low lows. A lot of times, people want to categorize it as something where your mood shifts, in a quick second or a quick minute, and that's one of the myths that comes along with that. It's something where a manic phase could last up to 2 weeks. And
Mm.
the depression phase can last at least 2 weeks. So it's a severe change in your moods, but it's not something that happens like quickly as many people would think. Because I know a lot of times we hear people say like once it'll pop up raining, and then the sun will be shining the next 2 minutes, and people be like, oh, that weather is bipolar. First of all, I hate when people categorize weather as a mental illness, because it's a mislabeling of that. But then also understanding that it's not that quick of a shift when it comes down to different moods.
Then Sonny, how how is it treated? Sonny,
Ooh,
you on mute.
you can't hear me?
Yeah,
You can
there
hear me
you
now?
go.
Great, great. Good morning to all. Thank you, Rashawn, for that intro. Bipolar is treated through both psychotherapy as well as using psychopharmacology or medication management. But it's also treated, and depending on the cultural background, it can be treated through um, spirituality. It can be treated, of course, through just having family and friends support. So I don't want to just relegate it just to medicine and the help given by clinicians, but it's all encompassing, and it's a very holistic treatment.
Yeah. I want to go back just quickly to Rashawn said that he mentioned that manic stage of it. Um, eh, can you kind of tell us, walk us through a little bit briefly what goes on at that point from onset, and what generally happens when an individual goes into this manic stage, as you mentioned.
Well, I love to share to individuals, not just based off of what I can read out of the DSM, but I actually was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So as someone that lives with it, understanding my manic phase, it looks like where I feel like I'm Superman. I feel like
Mm,
I could do any and everything at all times, and I try to do any and everything at all times. But
okay.
then I also feel like that I'm invincible. I can and nothing can hurt me. Sometimes you may see people do an excessive spending during these times, but for me, it's more of a hyperactivity, and my brain is constantly going, constantly racing, and especially as so when I went through my manic phase in college, it could look more like a you know um, hypersexuality, and hypersexual activity, and doing those particular things. And then when you're doing these things, you're not being as safe as you should be. Because again,
Mm,
you feel like you're superhuman, and nothing can touch you. It's starting a lot of projects at the same time. It's you don't need a lot of sleep during these times. You can't sleep because my thoughts are going so fast. And it's a elevated sense of self, if it,
mm,
to put it in simpler terms. And I think that's something where, um, you know, people may categorize it as, you're really feeling yourself at that time, and you
mhm.
try to do every single thing. But that's in simple terms, that's what it looks like.
Wow, that it's dangerous, right?
Oh, very, very dangerous. It could be dangerous to not only yourself, but individuals that are around you as well.
Yeah. Sonny, what are some factors, I should say, that have contributed to Black Americans not receiving help for bipolar disorder or any other mental illness?
Well, of course, there's the long. First of all, Rwenshaun, thank you for sharing that. Rwenshaun did something for us that I was gonna do, but perfect because Rwenshaun lives it, and I was gonna create this character called Byron Pole, to demonstrate this. I might allude to it later on, but what Rwenshaun provided us, I think, is very, very instrumental. That we get what we call a phenomenological illustration of it from his lived experience. In terms of the question, in terms of like the causes of it, you're asking.
Yeah, some of the factors that contribute to Black Americans not receiving help
Yes,
for
yes,
bipolar.
yes. Well, historically, there's the long-standing disparity issues in this country between the Black community and, of course, the medical community. You add on top of that some of the misconceptions that persons may have of bipolar. For example, when you first hear the term bipolar, often we just associate that with the term crazy, as opposed to seeing that it's something that is treatable. I think also one of the things that within our community that may also limit us from receiving treatment is also some of the cultural beliefs that we may have regarding bipolar, as maybe it's a spiritual experience that I'm having. Often persons with bipolar can become hyper, not just sexual and impulsive with their spending, but they can become hyper religious. There's a fixation, if you will, on spiritual matters. And sometimes that can even be interpreted as a person is prophetic. A person
Mm,
is sometimes celebrated within some milieus, and so it can go undetected, if not mistaken, in some aspects. You add to that, of course, a lot of persons of color don't feel comfortable with the providers that are often providing the services to persons that fall within particular minority groups. So you add all these factors, and you have this gumbo of you stay over there, I'll stay over here, and I'll pretty much suffer in silence or continue to find myself in hospitalizations for my bipolar. But then I get released and I don't continue with the medication, or there's a sense of I'm misunderstood. And I'm sure Rwenshaun can speak a lot more to this. It's why me?
right, right.
Why am I suffering with this condition? There could be also a sense of denial. That's not what I really have. It was just some bad weed. It could be a combination of ideas and belief systems that we hold to that can actually be factors leading to this to bipolar not being treated correctly, if not adequately.
Mike V is asking how much does racism and lasting effects of slavery play on the impact of mental health for Black people?
I think it plays a huge role, because I mean, it's certain things that are passed down from generation to generation. The way we view ourselves, the way we handle certain things that actually occur in our lives, and then the trauma that comes along with that. Because even well, I was actually hospitalized back in 2006, and once I got out of the hospital, my grandmother, she was able to run down every single symptom that I had going on. And without talking to anyone, the way she was able to do that, because she said she lived with those same symptoms, and
Mm,
but she never received any treatment for them. And so understanding some certain things run hereditary, but I mean the trauma that we are exposed to from generations of just abuse, not being seen as human, but then also certain things that we had. A lot of times we rely on just pray about it because you don't have anything else to rely on. So you hold on strong to that to be able to try to push forward.
And Sonny, Power 96 is asking, does PTSD from war cause a veteran to develop bipolar disorder?
Well, bipolar falls under a spectrum, which is what we call the mood disorders, whereas PTSD falls under what we would call part of the acute anxiety spectrum. Now, there is what we call comorbidity, in which these two conditions can co-occur within a particular person. But certainly, you could see how having been in a combat zone, and that could even be the streets of Chicago, for crying out loud.
Gosh, yeah.
That I come from from an environment in which I was on hyper alert at all times. And you can see how that can correlate to now a person having mood disturbance. But I'd be cautious to say that one can cause the other, as opposed to the two can coexist at the same time. To Rwenshaun's point, because it's so often that bipolar is hereditary, like you see it within the family system, that it probably was something that was dormant. It probably was a condition that just we didn't have a name for. And so we just figured, like, I'm going through the blues as far as the more depressive side of bipolarism, or someone just saw me as a hothead when actually I was in a full-blown manic episode. So
Wow.
there's two distinctive diagnoses that I don't think we should conflate. With that said, though, there is another particular condition that can often mirror, if not look very similar to bipolar. There's two actually I want to mention. One is called borderline personality disorder, where in which a person's relationships is very unstable, as is their moods, and so it can easily be confused for bipolar. And sometimes the two do coexist. In addition to that, we could say the same thing of what is called schizoaffective disorder, where a person demonstrates cognitive impairment, although it's coupled by having severe emotional, or if not mood disorder, aka bipolar, either type 1 or type 2.
Yeah. And here's a great question, David Youngblood, Rwenshaun. Are there warning signs that you might recognize in tools you use to stave off full-blown extremes?
Yes, there are. And so I was diagnosed in 2006. So I've been living with this now for almost 20 years, right? And I think it comes to the point of me understanding that this is something that I will live with for the rest of my life. And honestly, I didn't get to that point until maybe 7 years after diagnosis. And that's because I went through the denial phase. I went to when I actually received my diagnosis. The doctor, I mean, they said I have bipolar disorder, but they didn't really explain what it looked like for me. And then this came from a white man, honestly. So it went in one ear and out the other. So I really wasn't paying attention to him. But then it wasn't until after 3 failed suicide attempts that I really started to take it seriously. So the first 2 times I tried to overdose on pills, and the last time I put a gun in my head and pulled the trigger, and it jammed on
Oh,
me.
God.
And yeah, and so for then, that's when I was like, oh, you got to really start to take this thing serious. You got to get the actual help.
Mm.
And when I started to get that help, I started to actually do research on myself to understand that me writing in my journal, me understanding the factors that play, the people that play a role in my life, the music, the food that I eat, how much water do I drink, all of these particular things, and me understanding if I'm feeling a certain type of way, I need to go ahead and take a certain action. If I'm in my moods of depression, where I can see an onset, if I'm laying in the bed 2 days in a row, something is wrong, right? Or even I notice that myself, if my room starts to get messy, or in my office my desk is messy, that's a clear indicator of what my brain is operating like. So I need to start cleaning that stuff up. I need to start, making sure I pay attention to my sleep patterns. If I'm sleeping too much or sleeping too little, if I don't have an appetite, all of these, we say small things, but these can be major things, and the depicting on how we actually feel. So I would say, to give a clear answer, I would say pay attention to how much food you're eating, what you're eating, how much sleep you're getting, the water intake, also your energy levels, as far as what things excite you, what things do calm you down, what things, if you feel like you have no feeling at all,
Hmm.
also the things that you've been engaged in. If you no longer if you like to play basketball and you no longer feel like playing basketball, like that's something to really pay attention to. But then also, if on the opposite end of that, for the manic phase, if you find yourself, you're starting to spend a lot more, or you find
Hmm.
yourself like your thoughts are racing a whole lot, these things are something to pay attention to. And then also pay attention, allow people that are in your life to also give you that direction as well, because sometimes we don't see what we're doing. We need to
Hmm.
rely on our support system to help us as well.
Wow. Sonny, within the Black community, there can be unique cultural challenges, of course, as we know, and kind of touched on already, surrounding mental health. How do you approach breaking down these barriers and fostering culturally competent conversations?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. That conversation can be had both, within the context of a therapeutic setting, because I think setting is very important. These conversations can be held within just family members staging an intervention, a loving one, that is, right? And these conversations, it's like, what is the intent? What am I trying to help this person understand? A few minutes ago, Rwenshaun alluded to leaning on the expertise of those who are on the outside looking in, saying, "Hey, Rwenshaun, I'm starting to see you off kilter." So it's those persons who are the loved ones. They play a critical role. Often I tell patients and parents of children with bipolar, if not other psychotic like disorders, you have to be their reality when they have lost touch with it. And so that means, helping to educate, members, within our community of how to be those supportive persons in such persons with bipolar's lives, and how they can be involved is, of course, being educated about bipolarism. That's first and foremost. You want to be able to speak to what you're seeing. Rwenshaun mentioned a litany of factors that are telltale signs. Um, Bipolar hit my family as well. So I've been dealing with bipolar on a very personal level since 2003. I have a few relatives who I've had to step in, when it came time for hospitalization, when it came time to being what we call it proxy or a medical directive, advanced directive. I've had
Right.
to sit in that role to help make medical decisions for those persons because of how crippling the condition can be. And so that meant I had to be able to know the signs. And this is prior to my being a psychotherapist. So I kind of had to learn on the fly. And so knowledge is, of course, is instrumental in being able to assist persons with bipolar. How do we further engage bipolar? I think, the church is very critical to who we are as a people. And so I think the church can definitely function as another vehicle, as another social service aligned with community-based agencies to help both get the message out as well as to provide the services that persons with bipolar are desperately needing.
Yeah, and Sonny, let me just stay with you right real quick on briefly. Kanye West, we know uh, he has publicly chosen not to medicate. He's been open about his diagnosis. He's also been open about resistant treatment. Um, I mean, where do you go? I mean, obviously you're not you don't treat Kanye, but an individual like Kanye who has taken such a stance, what do you do about that? What
Well,
can you do?
Kanye's situation is not uncommon for those of us in the psychiatric community. For many years, I worked at a psychiatric facility, which down here in South Florida we call, the Baker Act facilities. And so often persons would, be Baker acted, would spend 72 hours or more, and would be released. And upon release, they're done with the medication. And that goes back to, what Rwenshaun mentioned earlier. There's still the disbelief, the denial. I've seen interviews where Mr. West has alluded to why he doesn't believe he should take the medication. Because honestly speaking, it is a trial and error basis. It is trying to find what is the right cocktail of medication. And in the process, I have seen patients experience some of the same symptoms they're trying to treat, And so it becomes a real catch-22 in many cases, in which what medication works and what medication doesn't work. And so in that event, a person can now redefine what they have. It's not bipolar. I went for what we call the Western medical model, and they're off. That's not what it is at all. In fact, this is spiritual. What I'm dealing with is demonic forces. What I'm dealing with is just the pressures of life. It's nothing more than that. It's just stress. And so one can euphemize bipolar because of the gravity of just how debilitating and how difficult of a condition it is to deal with. I treat a handful of patients, and I diagnose patients with bipolar. And often what I try to help them with understanding is it's moderating the moods. It's and how do we moderate the moods? There is what I strongly believe in. I've been on this show several times. I'm an advocate for soul consciousness. And that is the deepest aspect of who I am, is aware. So there's a level of self-awareness and what I'm going through. But to Rwenshaun's point, there's a certain degree, consciously speaking, in which I may be so lost in the throes of a manic episode or my depressive episode, I need that assistance from outside loved ones. And so maybe in the case of Mr. West, there have been a handful of people who've come into his life and have tried to get him to get the treatment. But as customary so often with persons who suffer from bipolar, they are resistant. And that can go on for quite some time, to the extent where a person can become suicidal.
No, the concept of, I'm sorry, yeah. Can you go
I
ahead?
wanted to add something to what Sonny said. Like,
Yeah, sure.
so also just understanding, as not speaking directly on Kanye, but then also as someone that has done the trial and error, like Sonny said, when it the medications. Sometimes you get on some of those medications and you feel numb. And when you feel numb, you hate that. You feel lethargic. You feel like a zombie. So you want to draw back. Be like, nah, I want to feel like myself again. So if I go back to when I was in college and I was going through a manic phase, I'm in the club. I'm standing on I'm standing on couches with liquor bottles and everything, and people loving you. So you get addicted to that as well, right? And you associate that with your creativity. You associate that with your genius, and you associate that with your ability to be who you actually are. And you feel like the medication takes away from that. So that leads to a lot of people not wanting to take the meds, not wanting to go through the trial and error period, but then also them just wanting to get back. Many people rather have those high highs where they can live in a moment and suffer from those low lows just to make sure that they still have those high highs.
I have to jump back in because I'm so happy Rwenshaun mentioned that, because that is very common with some persons who in particular are hyper manic, in which they really are addicted to the high. In fact, I can't make music without this. So the manic episode in itself is almost akin to a cocaine high.
Wow.
And the wild part about it is, as I went through my phases and understanding myself, I learned that my creativity is not based off of just whatever I'm living with when it comes to bipolar disorder. It just takes a little bit more work and a little bit more discipline for me to learn myself and to be stringent on those particular things and creating this process, cutting out my distractions, not scrolling on social media and stuff, and just really focusing and really going inward to be able to tap into that instead of just not medicating or not dealing with my actual issues that come with the diagnosis that I was given.
Yeah, I missed this question earlier. Mike V posed it. Sonny, he says there's an urban term called RBF, resting B face, to describe Black women facial expression. How much does body language how much does body language determine mental health for Black folks? How much is it used, I guess, is the
Well,
question.
I don't think it's a fair assessment to just make a clinical impression of someone just based on physical attributes. Of course, we as clinicians, we are trained to perform mental status examinations, which is to observe behavioral posturing, to observe facial gestures. So we will look at if a person's affect, aka the facial expression, to see if it's congruent or incongruent with what they are reporting in terms of their mood. But I think it's best to rely on the patient's report because they can tell you what they're going through as opposed to me just making a quick judgment. And that often is how we as Black people often are judged. So it's not just RBF. One could just look at just BF, black face, and make an assessment.
Facts.
So with that said, we want to stick with the clinical techniques that we're trained in. And that is, you are a human being, first and foremost. You are not your diagnosis. You're not some label, because diagnosis, let's be very clear, they're there for categorization purposes. They help us to diagnose. But so often the person gets so caught up in the labels that that's all we're talking about. And the person never gets treated. We're just discussing symptoms and we're just discussing, the length of time, the frequency, the intensity, as opposed to, damn, Rwenshaun, you going through that? Talk to me. Let me hear about it, man. Break it down to me. What's it like? This is Sonny. It's like I'm in a video game. It's like GTA and I'm riding the streets. Now we're having a conversation. It's not just clinical jargon, but it's more so a discussion between two living human beings.
The concept, gentlemen, of a strong Black man or strong Black woman is often associated with resilience, but can also contribute to reluctance in seeking help for mental health issues. How do we navigate that?
So I think it's the thing of understanding we got to create those spaces for us to talk. And it's not just to have real discussions in a therapeutic setting. It's also with your family. It's also with your friends. It's in those particular things. So like if we all just sitting around kicking it and we're watching a game or something, we can't just talk about the game. I need to talk about, Sonny, what you got going on today? Like how have you been feeling? How is the family? How is it for you to show up and take care of every single person? What do you need from me as a friend? What do you need as a space of respite? Those are the actual things that we got to have within our circles to be able to do these things. Because if we only depending on, clinical individuals, or we only waiting for individuals to go seek therapy, we're going to still end up in the same rat hole that we in now.
Wow.
There's a scene from the movie. I'm gonna take you guys way back. 1987. The Predator. There's this scene. There's a scene when Jesse Ventura's character, they're towards the end and they're waiting for the Predator and they're just waiting and this guy's like, "Yo, you're bleeding. I ain't got time to bleed." And I think that's sometimes the tough guy mentality that we can develop as strong Black men and strong Black women. I remember this Black sister once told me in therapy, "I'm tired of being a strong Black woman." Yeah. So it's the therapy couch is come and lay down your burdens. Because why? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So we're not always strong. We are weak. It's part of our humanity. And in that humanity is where we find our vulnerability. And that vulnerability is where healing and health can occur.
Can you provide some insights into the intersectionality of substance abuse and bipolar disorder in the Black community and how treatment approaches can effectively address both issues at the same time?
Sure. So we're talking about co-occurring disorders, and that is I smoke weed because I'm, I got a lot going on. I drink because that wife is just getting on my nerves. Well, what do you mean by nerves? Let's talk about that. It's like, I don't sleep, Mr. Sonny. How long are we talking about? Man, I haven't slept in years. Yeah? What else can you say about that? Well, because I don't sleep, I'm up all night. And when I'm up all night, during the day, I'm really agitated. So how do you fall asleep? I drink some more. So it becomes like this cycle. I need this for that, but that creates this. And so when we have a co-occurring disorder, such as substance/mental health problem, it's treated by addressing, well, it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg. And that's going to be treated based on a case-by-case basis. Typically, you want to go with the mental health disorder, but if the substance abuse issue is exasperating the mental health disorder, then we got to tackle the substance abuse issue. And that means sometimes it means admission, sometimes it means 12 steps, 12, and sometimes it may mean, group therapy or a person coming in for regular treatment. But sometimes it gets really, really tricky because the co-occurring problem exists within the family system. Oh yeah, my daddy drank. Oh, mom, yeah, man, she be popping them pain pills. So then we see it could become familial, and it's within the context of the entire family system.
And it's societal, because
Okay.
it's common for us to just go to the liquor store after work and grab something, grab a bottle, or go to happy hour because we had a stressful day at work. Now with marijuana being legalized, so that's going to be something else that's going to be it can cause an issue in certain ways, even though we know it has its benefits. So we got to think about our society as well. Like, does our society even want us to be well? We thrive off of people being sick.
Wow, make a lot of money off people being sick, right?
Yep.
Rwenshaun, you wrote a book. Did that prove doing something like that? How does that help you? Does that prove to be therapeutic?
Yeah, it was definitely therapeutic for me to be able to, and a lot of it came from my journal entries. That I started writing in the journal back when after I was hospitalized, and just to be able to utilize that to help other individuals, and it was therapeutic. I wrote it as a way for people to just dig deeper into their own mental wellness, and I wrote it as a playbook to say. And I wanted individuals to really start to take their stuff seriously. And just to be able to reach the masses and touch people and understand that my story is not uncommon, but I also don't want individuals to get to the point where they no longer want to be here, but then also just to be able to seek help.
Yeah, and Sonny, I just want to go back. You were talking about the familiar aspect, the family aspect. Uh, is there some sort of connection with genetics at all when you talk about bipolar disorder, particularly within the context of Black American
Yeah.
communities?
Usually you'll see it. If not directly from the parent above, you'll see it through down the history. Earlier Rwenshaun, and of course, Rwenshaun, thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
Your bravery is to be commended. Because his lived story is probably helping a lot more people here than just us spitting out
Hmm.
data. But it's when he mentioned that his was a grandmother you mentioned, Rwenshaun.
Yep, my grandmother.
Yeah, she said, you know what, I kind of can relate to that. So yeah, she can relate because we are related, and so definitely we can see that there is definitely a genetic link based on what all the data and all the research is showing. I know I mentioned within my own family system, it's a couple of relatives actually that I can think of, and both diagnosed with the exact condition. It may manifest itself somewhat differently, but there are clear similar and significant symptoms that pretty much mirror one another. But addition to just the genetic link, There's another condition that I want to just quickly throw out there because it can be linked to bipolar, and that is what we call shared psychosis, or what we call in French folie à deux, the folly of two. And that is in a family system in which one person, let's say, is suffering from bipolar, the caretaker or just other family members, they're all impacted by this because it's a solar system, if you will. And we're in this constellation. And so what affects one affects the other. And hence you can see a person begin to demonstrate symptoms or symptomology almost similar to the person who actually is suffering from bipolar, which is why that person would need to be evaluated just to make sure that it actually is the case versus it not being the case. It's just I'm just reacting to the gravity of dealing with a family member that has bipolar, type 1 or type 2.
Rwenshaun, David Youngblood is asking, does talking about bipolar disorder help you, or is it a trigger?
No, it's not a trigger for me, not at this particular point, because I continuously to do the work on myself. I continue to go to therapy. I understand that this is something that I have to live with for the rest of my life, and I accepted that. I understand that this is just a part of my life, and I use my actual diagnosis as a baseline for me to understand how I need to navigate and move through life. What things do I need to help me? What people do I need in my corner? What things, how I need to structure my day? All of those particular things. So no, it's not a trigger for me to be able to talk about these things. Like I said, I've been living with this for almost 20 years, but then I'm not afraid to do the work on myself either, and I'm not afraid to have people that are close to me in my life call me out on certain things where I'm not doing things that I necessarily need to do, and correct from there. Understand that I'm human, make mistakes. You have different challenges, and you move forward.
Right. Sonny, I would imagine that someone in your seat, in your position, you would recommend talking about it more.
I'm sorry, sir.
I said I would imagine that someone in your position would recommend talking about bipolar disorder
Oh yeah.
more.
Yes, similar to when Rwenshaun mentioned he journals, and in his journal it led to a book because the journal is the journey. Because by talking about it, first of all, there's the sense of I'm not alone. For
Right.
me, when helping persons with bipolar, one of the main things I want to help them with is avoiding isolation. I think when they isolate, then at that point, the symptoms can progressively worsen to the point where they would need hospitalization and immediate stabilization. So by talking, you now have accountability partners, the loved ones that we mentioned earlier that can call out what they see that you can't see. There's this beautiful model called the Johari window. And the Johari window highlights these four quadrants. And one quadrant is about self-awareness. One is what is called the open self. It's what I call the obvious self. This is what I know about me and what you know about me. It's clear to everyone. But then there's what we call the blind self, or what I call the oblivious self. It's what I can't see about me that you can see. And then there's what is called the hidden self. What you don't know about me, only I know it about me. We call that the mysterious self. So that blind self, which a person can't see certain things about them, they are just ignorant to it because maybe they are in the throes of another episode. That's where I need you. What's that song by Hez? I had a song, Stacey. What's that song by? It was coming. What's that song by Hezekiah Walker? I need you to survive. I need you. You need me. We're all part of his family. We can't do it alone. And hence, when Rwenshaun mentioned, it's also not just within the micro system of the family, it's within the macro system of society as a whole. We need each other. And so as a community, it's going to take us to help us. Isn't that what FUBU was all about?
So, Rwenshaun, just so you'll know, Sonny will, from time to time, he'll drop some Biggie Smalls or whomever on you. So don't worry about it. And before we go, gentlemen, this is greatly appreciated. What community-based resources and peer support initiatives are available to complement traditional treatment methods for individuals with bipolar disorder, particularly, of course, within underserved communities?
I mean, I feel like there are a lot of different ones. So even with my organization with Eustress, we do a lot when it comes down to showing people that even coloring is something that is important for us to be able to actively meditate. We do Black men's yoga classes. Also, I got a lot of different homies that do drum circles, or understand that Reiki could be something for individual with a touch into the energy healing and all of those things. And so being able to, tap into so many different plethora of resources that are out here, understanding that it could be a combination of all of these things. And it's not just, medication. It's not just psychotherapy. It's not just going to church or relying heavily on your spirituality. It's all of these things that could definitely tap into, and you can be able to, focus on your whole self.
Yeah. Sonny, any resources you'd like to mention?
Yeah, they. I just saw on the screen here. I want to give a major shout out to the psychiatrist. I think she's out of Georgia or DC, Dr. Tracy Marks. She does amazing videos on mental health. It's very animated, very colorful, but extremely informative. So I think folks should definitely check out her videos for educational purposes. But it can't just stop at the education. We actually need treatment, and that's where I think, because the research is showing us that clearly Black people do well under Black professionals or Black providers. It's good when you're Google searching for help and support to specify that. Specify, I'm looking for a Black psychiatrist. I'm looking for a Black therapist. And so do your due diligence, because the help and the services are out there. Sometimes finances can become the barrier, and in cases like this, it's good to type in your Google search community-based mental health organization. Most cities in this country have community-based programs where they can help persons who, for a myriad of reasons, have financial problems that could impede them getting the help that they need. So listen, the internet is there for us. Let's put the internet to use. I do want to kind of caution against a lot of folks are getting a lot of their information off of social media. And I think we live in a day and age where a lot of folks who really are not trained may mean well, but may not be giving out the best information. So it's in your best interest to not just rely on what you're seeing on social media, but to actually do your research on Google, to look up licensed professional institutions and organizations to get the help that you need.
Well, really appreciate Sonny, Etienne, of course, and Rwenshaun Miller. We definitely appreciate both these change agents. We had a great discussion this morning, and anybody who might be suffering, those resources that Greer continues to put up, please don't hesitate to reach out to them and take heed to both Rwenshaun and Sonny about looking for those who look like you to help treat you. So important. Thanks so much, guys. And thank you all for watching Let It Be Known. Go to our YouTube page, please, and subscribe to the LIBK-News. And we will bring you so much more of this in the days, weeks, and months to come. We will see you again tomorrow.